I'm going to do a video of Toki for the Commodore 64, and this is a cartridge game, and I think it's one of the games that was released intended for the cartridge system, but as with all Commodore 64 cartridges, it will just work on any Commodore 64 machine. And for some reason, all cartridges all have roughly the same shape on the Commodore 64, but there's not really any particular reason why it needs to be, but that just seems to be how it is. Oh yeah, as you can see there that it's compatible with the C64GS. It's a nice clean cartridge, that. You also get a little booklet. Well, it's not really a booklet, it's just a fold out piece of paper. Now this is the first Commodore 64 game that I've done a video of since I fixed it. Well, what happened is that the sound chip broke, so I was getting sound, instead of all of the sounds, I was only getting part of the sounds. So if you had a music track, you'd only get part of the music. And I wasn't 100% sure that it was actually the sound chip that was broken, but I bought a replacement, and it's not an official Commodore 64 SID chip. It's a modern clone, and of course I've tested it and it sounds perfectly fine to me. It's a little bit disappointing that this game was never released on the Amstrad cartridge machines, because it is a pretty good game actually. And the cartridge port is at the back here. It is actually fairly difficult to get these cartridges in sometimes. There we go. Of course, by Ocean. They did publish some pretty damn good conversions in their day. And we've even got a little intro. It's not exactly the same as the arcade original. It's pretty good though, I like the effort. Music for me. So here we are, first things first, the main character looks really ugly, I think. Everything else graphically looks pretty good. Sometimes Commodore 64 games could look really ugly, but this does look pretty good. So yeah, this is a platform shooter game, and the levels are pretty small really, but they're not repetitive at all. And it's one of those games that is a bit unique, and I don't know if I'd call it tongue-in-cheek exactly, but it does have some quirky stuff going on. So he does shoot a little bit slower than I'd like. There are times when enemies can sort of rush you or appear from off screen, and I don't like how slowly he shoots. You can actually jump on enemies Mario style as well. Some enemies just explode projectiles at you all the time. You can see down the bottom there is a time limit, so don't hang around for too long, although to be honest with you, you will rarely run out of time. Now it looks like I'm making pretty good progress here. I had to practice quite a lot to get this good at level 1. This is definitely a game that requires practice, and replaying a game until you get better at it is something that seems to be lost a little bit today, but you really do need to practice and practice. Before recording this video, I played this, let's just say several times, and I got to the first level boss, and I just kept dying on the first level boss. I almost defeated the first level boss, got him down to 1 hit over and over again, and I was starting to get annoyed with it. But I did pass it eventually, and I got all the way to level 3. Couldn't quite shoot them fast enough. But there are definitely some sticking points that just require, I guess, learning how to get past them. Right, that was easy enough, wasn't it? I think I'll choose music again. You can easily get caught out by this enemy here. There's a sort of semi-randomness to his shooting. Now, one little problem that I've not mentioned yet. Like quite a lot of other Commodore 64 games, this Commodore 64 game puts jump on the up on the joystick or control pad, but there are times where you need to shoot up as well. Did you see that glitch just then? To shoot up you have to be holding the fire button, but there are definitely times in a bit of a panic that you will accidentally jump and you will jump into the enemy that you're trying to shoot. I suppose there's not really much you can do. Well, I'm sure it's perfectly possible to have joysticks with 2 buttons on it. The Commodore 64 just never really became a thing. I get killed here quite a lot. These enemies look very simple, but they're a little bit more tricky than you might think. You can only shoot left and right when you're in the water, and then turtles kind of approach you at a bit of a tricky position and then move up and down. Don't jump out of the water. Oh, that kept killing me. when you fall into the water, he does this really weird, he does this kind of weird art, but he does the same one regardless of how you've actually entered the water. It's very weird, and it kept getting me killed. I think I might have cut out quite a lot of times where I died. In fact, there is quite a lot of enemies on screen at once. It's not slowing down at all, is it? And this is not the end of level 2, this is just the midway boss. I must say, I do like the graphics in this game. They did a really good job. By the time this game came out, the Commodore 64 was really old. But then again, I mean, it's been such a long time since the Commodore 64's commercial life that all Commodore 64 games look like Commodore 64 games at this point. Alright, so this is the proper boss, and he's pretty easy really. You can bounce on these things, but you have to be careful because he'll teleport over to you like that. But he doesn't really shoot at you or anything, he just keeps spawning them enemies. You can see the boss does have a life bar at the bottom there. Of course, this is one of the Ocean cartridge games. There was a point where Ocean bet big on cartridges, and they actually invested in making their own cartridges. They heavily supported the Amstrad GX4000, well, the Amstrad Plus cartridges, and they bet heavily on the Commodore 64 too. And they sort of thought that the Amiga would start getting cartridges too, which obviously never happened. And this was one of their games, and to be honest with you, most of the games they released on cartridge are pretty good games. But they also kind of promoted them as being games that were only possible on cartridge, and I don't really think that's true. I think the only difference between a cartridge and a cassette tape is the fact that you would have to load in the levels separately, and the only difference between a cartridge and a disc is that not many people had a disc drive, but every Commodore 64 has a cartridge port. So I don't really know what sales were for cartridge games, but they probably weren't as high as cassette games. And I know there was a lot of budget companies out there that only released cassette games at very, very cheap prices. I don't think cartridges were going to become the next big thing. Anyway, back to the game. I'm on level 3, and obviously things are getting trickier. But this is one of these sticking points I was talking about. I just could not beat this enemy. And I don't think this is a boss, I think this is an enemy that just appears a couple of times during this level. I don't know, I just could not beat him. Yeah, if I picked up that thing on the left there, that would have been one of them American football helmets, wouldn't it? Which would have helped me quite a lot. But it's too late for that, it's game over. So there we have it. Now before I finish this video, I'll tell you, my next video is going to be a homebrew version of Toki for the Amstrad CPC, which I discovered after playing this one, and it's not a proper games I've got video because it's just a download and it's work in progress. And in fact there's 2 demos which I'll show you.